Welcome in. It is Pro Football Today. Once again, here on SportsGrid. We were live with you yesterday as Week 18 of NFL action has begun. We will button it up today.
I'm not liking the energy. I'm not liking the energy start here today.
Whoa.
Usually you're on fire.
Wow.
Yeah, come on. Kick it up.
Really?
Hey, everybody, let's get it going. All right.
There you go. There we go. Okay.
Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi here. Perhaps I'm a little depleted. If Pickens would have caught one of the 18 30-yard
over
receptions,
a half a yard.
I would have felt good. We have so much to get to today, and we will get into what we saw yesterday. But I'd be remiss, Lisi, if I didn't also acknowledge that tonight we get record stakes, one of the best regular season games potentially we've ever seen.
Yeah, we have a team in terms of Minnesota and Detroit, both 14-2 overall. Minnesota potentially the hottest team in the NFL, winning 9 straight heading into this matchup, and Detroit got off the mat, right? Started a little bit slow last week against San Francisco, found a way to pull out and win that game, put up a 40 spot, a little bit undermanned offensively and defensively, but they're playing at home, 6-2 straight up at home. We'll see how it plays out a little bit later tonight, Don.
It's going to be an awesome game. You see that total there, 56.5. We're expecting fireworks, 2 really good offenses getting after it. So much on the line where if you win, boy, it feels like you on a rocket ship to the Super Bowl. And if you lose, sitting back at your season going, how did we win this many games and aren't possibly going to get a home field advantage game in the playoffs? But also understand this. There's very few games sometimes you look at in an NFL regular season and you say, I just want to sit down and watch this without a wager. This is your game tonight where even if you don't have a bet, and you're kind of crazy if you don't have a bet on that one, but my goodness, this is a great game to watch.
I was going to say, sell me something. The whole segment's getting Donnie to bet game of the year, apparently. I am very excited to watch that one play out. You have at the moment right now a field goal line in some places, 2.5 in others. But what this is going to do to the futures market is something that I know this desk has made sure to talk to you about for a while now. Back when Detroit was plus 250 to go out there and win a Super Bowl. Back when DRS was able to grab incredible numbers on the Lions to win the conference. Even then, a few weeks later, as things materialized, saying, hey, I don't know what's about to happen here. When you take it from just the NFC scenario of it all, the Lions are currently 2-1 favorites. Then it's the Eagles at 320, and then the Vikings at 360. At this point, the only thing I'm sure is if the Lions lose, they won't be favorites. Maybe it will just end up being Minnesota because what a win would suggest for them. The Eagles, though, will be sat there as well. Philly today, a part of the conversation of Week 18, maybe the main example, because within Week 18, we know teams rest. We know they say, hey, you know what? It's the Super Bowl that matters. Let's get ready for the postseason. And usually, Donnie, that is not met with any pushback. Except the Philadelphia Eagles today will pass on a chance at history, and it has had a lot of people wondering if it's the right decision to not give Saquon Barkley and the Eagles offense the opportunity to get Saquon 101, 102 rushing yards for the single-season rushing record.
Yes, and there are advantages to that you can take care of, which the Eagles are going to do. But if we just look at that NFC Championship odds picture, you see the Eagles in second place right now. If we're paying attention, no matter who wins this game tonight, Kevin, that team is going to vault into that number 1 spot, and rightfully so. The only bye week in the NFC, the only team that would have home field advantage throughout no matter what happens here. That's what you're looking at. But also from an Eagles perspective, you're looking at teams they think could possibly play in the next round, which, again, is going to be big indicators. Everybody in the NFC playoffs is a legitimate team. You might even think that numbers 3 and numbers 4 in the seeding would probably lose to the teams in the 5, 6, and 7. That'll play out. We'll handle that later. But if you are just looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, the Packers, chances they play their full starters today, it's actually quite high. Because why? Washington has to beat Dallas, and if that game is close, you can't justify the Packers sitting their starters until at least the third or fourth quarter until that game is out of reach. Advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles. So to your advantage, where we're looking at that Saquon Barkley going for it or not, it was a blessing in disguise. I called it 2 weeks ago when they lost to Washington. This is going to work out in the Eagles' favor because no matter what, Joe, they're going to have a bye.
He's the catalyst of that offense. Yeah. Without Saquon Barkley 100% involved in that offense, they're not as dynamic, Kevin. Think about what happened last year. First-round game, they lose and get abused by Tampa Bay. I think for Nick Sirianni, Kellen Moore, and that offensive staff and the team as a whole, you don't want to leave any doubt or question marks surrounding your first-round game, right? You want to make sure you're going in 100% healthy, 100% focused, all systems go. You run Saquon 20, 25 times in this ball game today against backups or even the first teamers against the New York Giants, and he gets hurt or he gets dinged up, that could affect your performance in a playoff type of scenario. So I think it's a good situation and probably the best for the Philadelphia Eagles moving forward.
I do think, though, and I think many would agree, it ups the pressure level going into their opening round game. You know, you've now made a sacrifice in order to put yourself in that position. You talk about the seeding of it all, though, right,
yes.
Donnie, where some teams are they could move around, and it's not priority number one. Take the Los Angeles Rams, for example. The Rams today with a victory would be the 3 seed in the NFC. A loss very likely is going to send them down to the 4. You could say, well, everybody's good within the back end of the NFC wild card. It doesn't make the difference, and maybe that's the thought process for the Rams. On the other side of L.A., with the Chargers, and we'll talk about this game shortly here on our show, very likely they'll go for it, Donnie, in an attempt to get up to the 5 seed so they could play the Houston Texans. Look-ahead lines available. Chargers look like they'll be road favorites if that's the matchup.
Yes, and it's something. It sounds kind of interesting where you break it down on both sides, because to me the 3 and the 4 in the NFC, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have the home game. You want that rest put in because you want that long layoff, or to say the long season that you had. You want that quick little layoff before you hit the playoffs. But if you are looking at a chance for the Chargers, I told you last week we'd love that 5 seed. It's not because you're lining up because you want to play the Baltimore Ravens, which you're not going to. I'm just using that as a team. But you're playing a team that, as you just said, probably be favored and a better football team. And if we're just asking today, Donnie, who are you going to pick? Chargers on the road, or are you going to take Houston at home? I don't care that Houston's going to rest their starters today, Joe, or possibly for the majority of the game. Give me the Chargers here. That matters to me in the AFC.
Their offense is much more consistent than what we saw on Christmas Day against the Baltimore Ravens. You're talking about a Houston team that can't run the football consistently now with Joe Mixon. They can't throw it with C.J. Stroud. Defense has concerns. They can't shut down the run. And what does L.A. like to do, right? That matchup plays out. You have to give the edge to the L.A. Chargers, and Justin Herbert now is starting to progress in terms of the passing attack. They're playing with confidence where Houston now is starting to answer, are we as good as we thought we were?
And the opposite end of it is a loss, and they'll be set to play the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens handled business yesterday, a 35-10 rout and cover on a 19.5-point spread against the Cleveland Browns. That victory there still saw the Steelers play their guys against Cincinnati and at home lose to the Cincinnati Bengals. What does that mean about Pittsburgh? We'll get into that. But the victory for Cincinnati pushes now things in a little bit more for a game for the Denver Broncos that we've wondered, what would it look like? What would it look like? Well, it looks like an 11.5-point favorite against Carson Wentz, and the secondary options here for the Kansas City Chiefs, Donnie, and some travel issues, upping this number a little bit now, even more in favor of the Broncos.
Yes, and Andy Reid's been known to rest his starters in occasions where he doesn't need his starters, and it's the right move. Super Bowl's on their mind. They have everything wrapped up they want to. But if we just go back in the time machine a few weeks ago, you were circling this game for the other teams trying to get in, go, ha. Denver's got Week 18 against Kansas City. Good. That's a loss for them. Let's see if we can creep back up. Now it looks like it turns into an automatic win, Joe, because the backups are in. But having said that, we're going to talk about this a lot today, Joe, and particularly the fact of the matter is Kansas City doesn't care if they win or lose this game, which means they're going to put a game plan together for Carson Wentz to be competitive here, as opposed to last night with Cleveland. The last thing they wanted to do was win that football game. You saw early, it's like, let's dig ourselves a hole, then we'll act like we're trying to play football.
You still want to have those backups ready should they be called on in terms of a playoff type of situation, especially your backup quarterback. So this is an opportunity for Kansas City to maybe throw caution to the wind, open up the playbook, and Spagnuolo's still calling the defense. Not going to be easy for Denver.
And also, if you're Kansas City, Cincinnati gets in, knocks out Buffalo, that's not a terrible thing. Miami's in the mix as well. We'll talk about yesterday's action next.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their third straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes, the ankle. Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, listen, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Back with you right here on SportsGrid. Let's take a look at what we saw yesterday, and let's just start with what we saw in the night game. The bigger game, the more important game, kind of no matter what happened between Baltimore and Cleveland. For Cincinnati, they needed a victory to keep their postseason hopes alive. For Pittsburgh, the difference now, let's just for the moment say the Chargers are going to win their game today. The difference for the Steelers was a look-ahead line of pick in Houston versus now being over a touchdown underdog potentially in Baltimore. One of the more costly losses of the season. And here's my angle of it, Donnie. Because Cincinnati was talked about so much more going into the game, I think it's going to be looked over a little bit. The fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers now have run up against playoff competition and not looked capable of getting the job done. This is a Cincinnati team that still, all suggestions are, they're going to miss the playoffs. The Steelers, at home, went for it, played for it, needed it, didn't get it. I think that's as big of a deal as anything else we saw in that game.
And not only they didn't get it, they were down 10-0 in the first quarter, which shows you, come on, man, let's rally the troops and the whole Mike Tomlin going to get the stink off this football team and pick up a victory. Yeah. You couldn't have had a better spot to play the Cincinnati Bengals. Freezing cold temperatures, on the road. T. Higgins has a high ankle sprain, and your top running back who's been wonderful this year doesn't even suit up for the game in Chase Brown. And then you're going to let them dictate based on their defense over your defense? That was as embarrassing as it gets, Joe, because I look even at some other requirements the previous 3 games. Hey, upper-level competition, you step up, you didn't play well. This was your get-right game in a playoff mode game where you were at home. And quite frankly, 19-17, I'm sorry, the game wasn't even that close.
No, think about the first time that they played, right? Russell Wilson dominates. He puts up 414 yards. They put up a 40 spot. They win that ball game by margin on the road. And from that time, they've been completely inconsistent from an offensive perspective. They rushed for 3.2 yards per carry yesterday, 4 of 12 on third down conversions. And I talked about it, Kev. This was a team that you should have dominated. You've now lost 4 straight. You're heading into the playoffs, and you're searching for answers, not just in terms of your offensive line, but your quarterback now. Is Russell Wilson the guy? We talk about that 414-yard performance. I tweeted out that was probably the worst thing that could happen to the Pittsburgh Steelers and all their fans. Why? Because Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin technically don't want to play that way. You look at the last 5 games since that performance for Russell Wilson, 856 total passing yards. He's averaging 171.2 passing yards per game. I got to be honest with you. They might have been favorites potentially before the Houston game. Now it's an even pick, and I would give the edge to C.J. Stroud over the way they performed last night.
Well, this is where it gets very interesting in Pittsburgh because when Russ took over, they win 4 games in a row, right? He comes out playing against the Jets and the Giants and looks pretty good in those games. Then he kind of is a part of the Steelers. We'll find a way. They beat Washington. They beat Baltimore. They lost to Cleveland. Guess what? They bounced back. You mentioned the 400-yard performance. But now it has been a disaster. And we have had conversations around Russ and Fields at times in a joking fashion. I think, Donnie, again, the way Russ hit the ground running, you were proven correct, right? But we sit here now. I'm not telling you Fields will be better. I'm not sure he'd be any worse. Russell Wilson, the selling point, and again, a selling point that you were absolutely spot on about, what he did for George Pickens. George Pickens is a loose cannon. You probably lost him with what we saw yesterday. What, 1 catch on 6 targets for no yards? I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not sure that the Steelers' best option isn't making a move to Justin Fields to get a spark, because I think we all know at the end of the day, this team's drawing dead kind of regardless.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to help either way at this point now. Just watching how it's playing out, there's no explosive plays back there. The running game wasn't there. And we're looking at a football game. Like, we're talking about Russell Wilson is going to be a quarterback that needs to be in a dome in perfect conditions, like his arm is shot. He didn't look all that great in the pocket yesterday. He did deliver some balls that got dropped late in the game, but separate that. Did it look like he had a lot of pop on his passes? You watch Joe Burrow, it's a completely different ball trajectory that comes out of his hands. And you're saying to yourself, well, he is a little bit more athletic. Athletic than what at this point? Got sacked multiple times last night by Trey Hendrickson. I just don't see this team peaking at the right time. It was almost like we were anointing Mike Tomlin as the best coach in the NFL 12 or 13 weeks in. Then once they got to the real competition and the attrition started to settle in, it's just not a good football team. And heading in, quite frankly, I was saying to myself, yes, you want to angle towards Houston. I don't think they could beat Houston in a dome environment, and I certainly don't think they could beat the Baltimore Ravens.
No, I don't think so either. If you want to play that way, and they had a very conservative approach early on, you have to run the football much more dominant than what they did yesterday. 3.2 yards per carry with Warren and Najee Harris on the ground. You're not going to get it done. You're certainly not going to get it done against the better teams in the AFC, teams like Buffalo and teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? You can maybe get 1 win. But again, playing a team like Houston in a dome that has speed on the perimeter, that's going to open it up. That's going to challenge your defense the way Cincinnati and Joe Burrow did over the top. This is tough. They've plateaued yet again, and they did it with a quarterback change when they were 4-2. I don't know what Mike Tomlin does at this point.
Here is, again, one of the, like, we get updates throughout sometimes, this week or last week. They're hoping they can extend Russ. Mike Tomlin is going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Mike Tomlin is not aged out of the game. Mike Tomlin is clearly a very good coach. You try and make the Kyle Shanahan comment about how he relates to Andy Reid. Mike Tomlin, you want to extend Russell Wilson? Are you insane? For what? Another 9-8 season to get your head beat in the playoffs? This is not how you run. This is not. At some point, Steelers fans are going to be honest with themselves. And I am not telling you that firing Tomlin is the MO. But if Tomlin thinks Bill Belichick is the greatest coach in the history of at least the last, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
But what really fell apart for Bill, he had too much control, right? Mike Tomlin has too much control if he's going to get this team to extend Russell Wilson.
Right, but he's turned into the Dr. Evil of the NFL, the Vic Fangio school of head coaching. Why win games 40-20 when you could lose them 17-13? They shake. The play calling shakes when they have to score more than 25 points. It's crazy.
Also, they got their 9th win. He's like, man, it's been a heck of a year, boys. Let's pack this whole
Somebody
thing
is asking if he's going to USC next year. I mean, really, that would be wonderful to watch.
Let's talk a little bit more about Cincinnati, Baltimore, and that Charger game today next.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes, the ankle. Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, listen, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
All right, back with you right here on Pro Football Today. Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi. We talked about the Steelers' end of it. Very likely their round 1 opponent will be the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe later on in our show we'll get into the MVP race and that conversation, but I'll go to you first, Donnie.
Yeah.
Did you have a main takeaway from the Baltimore 35-10 victory over Cleveland?
Expected a big win. Now, granted, that spread was close to 3 touchdowns and was in that margin for the bulk of the game, I should say. Only late was it actually covered. But you know what I took away from this football game? Zay Flowers going down with an injury. Now, you had to win this football game, so nobody in Baltimore is going to get angry. Also, in this football game, 3-4 minutes ago, Derrick Henry's getting carries. He's not close to the record at that point. What are you looking to do with Derrick Henry getting a couple extra? That's what I took away. They are so talented, the Baltimore Ravens, but they need a couple things to click. Mark Andrews looks like he's back to his really good tight end form. Likely is a very good secondary option. It was great to see Rashad Bateman be that lead dog in the second half and provide some oomph in that offense. But I'm still worried about the previous trials that they've had in the playoffs. And if you're telling me next week, and if it is the Steelers, which is fantastic, it's going to be so much fun. Yes, the Ravens are better than the Steelers. But you give me 17, 18 degrees, some wind down there, that Steelers defense comes to play, no Zay Flowers, I think we might have a ball game. My takeaway was I expected to win. They needed it. They got it. They're the division champions. But now, Joe, as I look forward to, if Zay Flowers is out next week, that is a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought they were a little inconsistent in the first half in the passing attack. Fourth down and goal or 4th and 2. Lamar Jackson with a poor decision. Now, granted, he throws for 217, 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. They run it for 6.3 yards per carry. They're a dominant team when they run the football. That's the biggest takeaway. When the Baltimore Ravens are having success with Lamar breaking contain like he did in the first quarter, and then Derrick Henry taking the game over in the second half, they're very difficult to beat. It's when you stuff the box, you take away Derrick Henry or limit him to a capacity, and Lamar's in the pocket, there are still times that he struggles and plays down to the competition. And in a playoff type of situation, that is still the major question mark for this team. If they can't run the football or teams take that away, can this passing attack elevate to the next level to the likes of, let's just say, Kansas City and Buffalo in a playoff type of environment?
I think, again, the odd thing around Baltimore, Lamar Jackson's MVP candidacy is almost all tied to who he is as a passer this season. The 4th, I think it is going to end up, best passer rating in a single season. I know he's a great runner.
Right.
But it's the passing this year. We get into the playoffs, and the conversation should not be, why is he throwing? That should not be the conversation for a guy we're trying to get a 3rd MVP in some spaces. We'll leave it at that. Cincinnati gets the win. and we can get into them a little bit more when we maybe get into the Broncos game of it all. But to me, as we've gotten closer to this moment for Cincinnati, it's the same feeling. They are good. If this was the college football playoff, they'd be in. But they are not a Super Bowl contender. They cannot pull away from any of these teams with a pulse, whether it be the typical defense not showing up, or in this spot, the offense didn't have the juice, Joe.
No, but the defense has played a little bit more consistent over the last 3 or 4 weeks. For the most part, they haven't been as abused as they were in the middle part of the season. So I think in terms of that aspect, if they do creep in today with the Denver loss, they can maybe win one game. But big picture, expecting this team to be an AFC contender, it's going to be very difficult with that defense. Now, that being said, you saw Joe Burrow, 277, Jamar Chase, 96 yards receiving. T. Higgins goes down again with the injury. That's always a cause of concern. But Gesicki has been a bright spot. Now back-to-back weeks, he has 68 yesterday, 86 a couple weeks ago. You can never say never. If they sneak in today somehow, some way, they could definitely make a little bit of a mini run.
Yeah, they better make that mini run this year because take a look at the offseason as how it's shaping up. Jamar Chase is not going to return unless he's the highest paid player in the NFL on the offensive side outside of a quarterback. Also, you take a look at T. Higgins. He's not going to be back next year. And you know who made $2.5 million this year who actually came on really strong? Mike Gesicki. He won't be back next year. You better get in this year because if we're talking about Mike Brown, the cheapest owner in the NFL by a wide margin, saying, what are we missing, guys? Defense. Okay, signs a couple defensive guys. Well, can't afford the offensive guys now. Good luck, Joe Burrow, next year with less weapons here and maybe a marginally better defense.
That, I think, is the most interesting thing about it is when the Chiefs moved on from Tyreek, obviously, they were able to pick it up in other areas of their football team. Can Cincinnati do the same? Excuse me. Can Cincinnati do the same is the question. And, I feel like it's one of those things. You won't know until week 6 of next year, right? It'll be hard to tell, but eventually we will find out. We're going to get over to the best game on the board, Minnesota and Detroit, next right here. It's Pro Football Today.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes the ankle, Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
All right, let's get into it here. Minnesota and Detroit. The stakes, again, is unbelievable. It's awesome. It's unfortunate, I know. Have we done the yearly dance of we got to stop at the wild cards, like let's reformat everything, where people are like, this should be the 1 and the 2 seed, and
No.
we haven't done that? People are into it? That's good. I'm glad. You know how every 5 years we got a 7 and 9 team, right? Wins a division. Like, we got to do away with.
Then they win a playoff game and everybody quiets down quickly.
Or they think that like the 1 year was the NFC East. They're like, this division will never get back on its feet. And then every year they put 2 teams in the playoffs. It's neither here nor there. The winner's the 1 seed, and potentially going to be booked as favorites to win the entire conference. The loser is at the moment projected to go to Los Angeles to play the Rams, which for these 2 specific teams, last year, that's who the Lions played. Very close game in Detroit. It's who the Lions opened with this year. Very close game in Detroit. For Minnesota, the only other team than Detroit who beat them this season is the LA Rams in that building. The stakes are unreal in this football game here. We can get into it, but are you guys right now feeling confident in a side? I know this will come out maybe hypocritical due to the bashing. I lean Detroit because they are at home, and I still think that home field advantage matters. And I would think there are aspects of Detroit's overall game that could be cleaned up in a moment like this. I think sometimes it's difficult to ask a team to go on the type of run you are asking Minnesota to go on to now snag this 1 seed. I lean Detroit. My action will be elsewhere in the game. Any lean for you, Lisi, or do you love a side?
No, I like Minnesota.
Okay.
That's the side, and I like them on the money line. You're talking about a team that has won 9 straight, right? They've won those games by an average margin of victory of 7.8 points per game. They're 6-1 on the road this year. 5 true road games outside the win in London against the New York Jets, right? They've won those games very close by an average margin of 4.8 points per game. But you look at the flip side for Detroit. Dominant home team, 6-2 at home. They've won those games by an average margin of 18.1 points per game. But let's look at the last 3 at home in Ford Field. They won against Chicago, didn't cover. Won against Green Bay, didn't cover, and lost outright to the Buffalo Bills. So now you're talking about 3 straight games where they haven't covered at home. I know they got the victory on the road and the cover against San Francisco. This is a different animal. I believe in the defense more than I do in Detroit. And I believe in Sam Darnold right now. 377 last week with J.J. on the outside. Give me the Vikings in the upset.
Yeah, it's one of those to me where, again, it's not a cop-out. I'm just going to go with the home team in this spot. Detroit, if it was in Minnesota, I would have done the same thing. But understand this. The winner is going to certainly reap the benefits of this victory by getting a week off and having home field advantage. That is massive. But let's take a look at the loser here and what happens to them. Let's just say, as Kevin pointed out, it could be the Rams. The Rams know full well they're not playing their starters this week. Sean McVay and that team is like, you know what? We are now going to be focused completely on these 2 football teams, and we've been capping them and going over all the film on those 2 football teams alone. When you look at the games between Minnesota and, going to take on Detroit tonight, they don't have the luxury of that. They have to go full gas this week, so they practice hard. But also go back to the week before. You look at the Minnesota Vikings had a really hard game with the Packers, and then you have Detroit who had the advantage to say, I'm going to rest my guys in a meaningless game, get them a breath of air, and be better on solid ground than what we could have been. They didn't. So the loser drops down to the 5 and then is going to say, we just went through a gauntlet the past couple weeks, played all our starters. We are out of gas. And let's just say this game ends up 30-27, a hard-fought victory. Then you got to go on the road against a team that's been waiting for you in their own building. My goodness, the loser is really going to be behind the 8 ball of a 14-win season.
Which is very few teams make a Super Bowl as the 5th seed. Very, very few. It is not an overreaction to say that your season is on the line in this game because of what the expectations have now become. We know Detroit was a Super Bowl or bust level team heading into the year. Minnesota obviously was not. Projected to be the worst team in their division. But things change. You're a win away from hosting the NFC playoffs.
Yeah.
You're 2 wins away from a home game in your building with a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. Minnesota's not going to sit and say, hey, man, that was a good time. That was fun. If they end up
Dap it up.
1 and done, you're not. You could argue nobody has more on the line than Sam Darnold. You can say the money's made. Maybe it is. Sometimes, though, you go out there, you have a bad game here, bad round 1, 2, you go, can't get it done in that big spot. That's how quickly these things can go. They can, right? Last year, Dan Campbell, right? Very honest. It's his style. Tells his group, we may never get back to this conference championship spot where our trip for the Super Bowl is on the line. Let me tell you, fall down to the 5 seed. He's got a good point. Lose Ben Johnson in the offseason if he's as good as we all think he is. And losing Aaron Glenn potentially. Whoa. Who knows what next year holds? That is, like, you cannot overstate how awesome this is tonight, the stakes of it all. Diving into this game, what stood out to me, early offense. Both of these teams know how to go early. I took the first half over at 27.5. Sometimes I see a big total, I go, that's too much. Move too far. This total has moved a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not stepping in front of these teams. The Detroit Detroit defense is atrocious. The offense is still incredible. And you can clearly tell the MO from Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold, and that team is we got to go quick.
Yep.
We got to jump out on teams when we can. I like points early in this football game, Joe.
It's a great look. I mean, and I'm not stepping in front of the 56.5. I actually lean to the over because both offenses and their identity is to push tempo and jump up early. And you have great signal callers in terms of Goff and Sam Darnold that are hitting on all cylinders. Jared Goff, if he throws 4 incompletions in a game, that's a bad performance. So I agree with that, Kev. I think that Minnesota, in order to win this game, is going to have to utilize Aaron Jones a little bit more. You look at the victory last week against Green Bay, 12 carries, 47 yards. Granted, he was nicked up in terms of the second half, but I expect him to have a bigger performance on the ground and even in the receiving game today. And think about this, too, Donnie. What did both of these coaches learn? What did Dan Campbell learn last year in terms of the loss against San Francisco, number 1? And what did O'Connell learn? He was in the situation potentially with Kirk Cousins a couple of years ago when he lost the game at home to the New York Giants in the playoff type of atmosphere, right? So this is a must-win game for both of these teams. Which team steps up? I do believe in Minnesota's defense because I believe that they'll get pressure on Jared Goff today. They might blitz him early and often, and without Montgomery there, I think they could be exposed a little bit.
Yeah, to Kevin's point here on Sam Darnold, this feels like a referendum game, which might not be fair. We have 14 wins, and he's been sensational so far, but he plays like a pumpkin tonight. They're going to be like, told you so. There's no way you can make him the starting quarterback, and it was just a coach and maybe a bad schedule if you can even get into that. But it is refreshing to see some of the prop bets that you can make between these two quarterbacks. Goff, 284.5, Darnold, 292.5. You want to throw 2 touchdowns? You're not getting minus 110, minus 120, minus 130, minus 210, and minus 245, respectively. We're expecting options here. And for me in this game, I know Jared Goff's going to get his, but to be honest, we are trying to pick on that Detroit defense. And if you think Detroit is going to be gas pedal all game long, 4th downs, we're going for it, Sam Darnold must answer. So if I'm picking one quarterback out of this game to throw for more yards and more touchdowns, it's actually Sam Darnold for me, which could be in a losing effort to give you a boost.
Yeah, that certainly could help. But again, like that, what is his passing yards number again, Sam Darnold?
292.5.
300 yards. You know who had those? That's when Mahomes was good. That's when we were getting those numbers.
377 last week, and that game was actually trending to the under before the fourth quarter
Don't
performance.
take field goal props in this game. Is anybody going to kick a field goal in this game? We're just going ham.
O'Connell will.
First, 4th and goal from the 3. Take the points 3-0.
I'll
means
throw
a lot.
this out there. There will become a time where we'll talk way more about the Vikings quarterback situation. I'll just say, I actually don't think it's that complicated. You just pay Darnold. Why are you rushing JJ back?
Hot takes out there.
I don't even understand. Like, I actually think this ended up being easier than if he was average. That's, for me, maybe it's a conversation for another time. Coming up next, we talk Chiefs Broncos on SportsGrid.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their third straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes to the ankle, Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
All right, we continue to break down Week 18. Lions-Vikings is the big one. Though, if I'm honest with myself, as much as I hyped it up, Carson Wentz is on the slate today. You got to be kidding me. Big screen only. Maybe at all the TVs get this game here. Might change your channel when Denver's out there. Who needs to see it? Let's get Wentz the football, man. Let's get this guy a starting job next season. Is that not what everybody's...
Steelers?
Are there... Save that franchise for themselves, man. In all seriousness, what you do have is a simple win-and-in scenario for the Denver Broncos. All they have to do is beat the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chiefs' backups. And Denver is home for this football game. They are up to an 11.5-point favorite due to travel delays for Kansas City. That number climbed. Everything has been able to break Denver's way. Everything, Joe. Any chance they don't pull it off?
I don't know if they do. I'm taking the Chiefs with the 11.5. I honestly believe that. I watched that game play out in terms of Cincinnati. Sean Payton took a very conservative approach in terms of the first half. It wasn't until Joe Burrow and Cincinnati pushed tempo in the fourth quarter that Bo Nix had to get outside the comfort zone. Again, what type of approach does Denver take today? They're 9-7 overall. They need the game. Are they going to allow Donnie Bo Nix to throw 25 to 30 times in this ball game up against backups for Kansas City that still has competent play in the back end? That is the one thing. Do you believe if you're back in Denver, do you think that they could score 24 points? Do you think that Kansas City can't score? Because that's what you're asking, basically. 24-14, you get the number and you cover this line. So, again, I'm not sure that Denver can get to 24 points with this offense. I don't know if Sean Payton wants to open it up that much. I think it's short to intermediate throws. Don't make mistakes. Don't force turnovers with the rookie quarterback and put your team in a position to potentially steal it just the way they did in Arrowhead. Again, I'd be shocked if they get over their team total of 24 today.
The only thing is, if they don't get over it, it means they probably didn't need to at this point, because you watched the game last night, and there are some correlations that you can make and some that you can't. Cleveland did have starters on the football field yesterday. Kansas City, not going to have any starters on the football field. The one thing that we always worried about Kansas City entering into the season was, can they figure out their tackle situation? They're basically playing Thuney as a guard at left tackle. He's not there. So now you're on third and fourth and maybe practice squad guys on the tackle position trying to protect Carson Wentz with Carson Steele as your top running back today. That Denver defense should be able to eat today. So just to get back to the point where I do think Denver can get into the 20s, I don't think they need to today. The one thing I will say, though, is Kansas City is going to call a pretty good game for Carson Wentz, because why? There's no hey, win or lose, it doesn't matter. Let's hope nobody gets injured. But the same thing I love about Spagnuolo's defense, he's going to call that defense. But it's a lot different when you have your top pass rushers and your top defensive tackle out, probably 2 of your top 3 linebackers out, and maybe, let's just say there's 6 or 7 DBs. Your top 3 won't play in this game. This should be pick and choose for Denver. It's just imagine of what we're getting out of Kansas City. Now, for me, some of the prop bets we'll go over later in the show. I hope Kansas City shows up, Joe. I hope Kansas City's 14-plus points to keep Denver activated for that game. But I would be very surprised if at the end of this ball game we're not looking at least a touchdown or more victory from Denver, just because they're playing their starters full go and Kansas City's playing all backups today.
Yeah, look, they certainly, Donnie, Denver is not a 10.5-point favorite by mistake.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is the 3rd time in the Mahomes year, I believe it is, that Reed has been able to bench his guys.
Mm-hmm.
One time he went to Henne, and then one time he went to Gabbert. This is not a bit. Carson Wentz is 100 times the quarterback that those 2 guys are. The last time Wentz got a start, last year, week 18, right? Going for the Rams. Throws 2, runs for 50 yards, rushes another one in. Carson Wentz is a starting-level quarterback in this league, despite what people have said for a very long time. Health and the decision to draft Hurts got him out of Philadelphia. The madness that is the Indianapolis Colts got him out of Indianapolis. He was not good in Washington. I won't pretend he was. Has anyone seen how Washington looked until they finally got rid of Ron Rivera? Ron Rivera was not good for that organization during his tenure there. So, to me, Donnie, I think my issue and why I'm on Kansas City today without any hesitation at the 11.5, if this was a fully healthy football game, what does this number look like? Kansas City is laying 6?
Less.
At Denver?
Less.
A fully healthy 4?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
if you had Kansas City all in, like they had to win this game without Patrick. Well, Patrick Mahomes had like a hamstring injury, right? Be back for the playoffs, but can't play in this game. I think that's about a 4 or 5 point line.
So
maximum.
You're saying Wentz with all the normal
Wentz
guys.
with everybody in there, that line would be about 4 to 5 points. It still is a favorite for Denver.
Which I think is totally reasonable. 15 points then? We've moved this the other way? Listen, and I understand what you're saying. You expect Denver to win, maybe 14 or what it would be is too much. I think it's way too much. You're going to look around today. Listen, the Tennessee Titans are starting Will Levis, who's their actual quarterback, and Wentz is 10 times the quarterback he is here to me. At least, like, week 18, we get a little bit of, silliness, and I believe, and maybe it'll cost me today, that Carson Wentz is a starting-level quarterback. This is way too many points if I'm right.
And you want him ready for the playoffs. You do, just in case Pat Mahomes gets a little bit nicked up or banged up, right? You want to be able to call on your backup. They did for years with Chad Henne. He's no longer there. You want to make sure Carson Wentz at least has game preparation and game experience, even though he hasn't, stepped up this year in terms of a start. You still want him prepared. And again, those wide receivers as well. Noah Gray, Sky Moore if he gets involved. You still want those guys prepared as well. And I think they might sneak in Marquise Brown a little bit just because he's gotten involved late in terms of the offense. Carson Steele, an above-average running back. He can pound it. He's had performances where he's rushed for 60 and 70 yards on the ground, could catch the football. Here's the other thing, too. Denver has won 5 games at home, right? They've won by 17.8 points per game, but this isn't Cleveland. This isn't the Raiders. This is still a team that has won 15 potential
Worse
games.
than the Raiders today.
Well, that's we'll see. We'll see. I just think Kansas City's backups will play. They might not win it and win the game outright, but 11.5 is way too much.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, though, with Denver is they do win again. They're projected to win, right? Then, all right, so they go into this game against Buffalo. And, how much can Kansas City push them to zap some of their energy? Or is this a cruise control game? Where this number is correct. I think that's a fascinating thing just we think towards next week. The one team who's like, hey, what about us? Or maybe not, Miami? Maybe they're like, no, forget about us. Yeah. We'll talk about their game next.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell? The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their third straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes the ankle, Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, listen, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. Won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Okay, back right here on Pro Football Today. If Denver wins, they're in. If Denver loses, well, Cincinnati still needs some help. The Miami Dolphins finding a way to be in the mix. Nobody wants them in the mix. Let's put it to you like this. I have a ticket on the Dolphins preseason to win the conference. I'm good. No thanks. I don't need to watch them play Buffalo again and watch them get smashed again.
Mm-hmm.
We have Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, and the guys at Six Score are the absolute best in the business. I think you said that you guys were like, hey, you know what happened with Tua? They're like, I don't know. His hip all of a sudden broke. I don't know what's going on with this guy. Tyler Huntley's going again. Is Tua back if they make the playoffs? Do they care? Do they want to make? The Jets are favored. Like, does anybody understand how insane that is? Anybody who needs a game today is laying way more than they are supposed to. The Bucs are laying 2 touchdowns. The Ravens yesterday laid 20 points. We just talked about Denver's laying double digits to Kansas City. The Dolphins are catching points, Lise, with a playoff spot on the line.
You came into work today with about 16 layers of clothes on, okay? That's how cold it is outside. I did too. It's freezing outside, right? Last time we saw the Dolphins perform in a cold weather environment was Thanksgiving night, where they got absolutely smashed by the Green Bay Packers. I know they stepped up against the Cleveland Browns last week. They win 20-3, but it was a balmy 50 degrees in Cleveland last week. It's back-to-back road games. Snoop Huntley finally showed up, 225 yards through the air, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. But I can't back Miami in a road environment in MetLife, even though it's the New York Jets, the gutless New York Jets, and Aaron Rodgers. They deserve to be favored because of how the Dolphins have performed in cold weather environments and just knowing that they're walking through the motions right now. So I would lay it with the New York Jets. I do believe that Aaron Rodgers going for his 500th career touchdown pass. I think he throws at least 1 or 2. Maybe they grind out a victory. I would lean to the under just because what are you going to get out of Miami in terms of a passing attack? It's going to be the rushing attack of Achane and Wright and all those running backs, Mostert. I mean, that's what you're going to get. So give me the Jets, give me the under, and I do like Devontae Adams plus 160 anytime touchdown today.
The Jets should win this game, but also understand, let's see how healthy that organization is. And I don't mean by the Jets supposed to go out there and win 45-10, and what a way to send us off into the offseason, Joe. I'm talking about just going out there and losing this football game to get a better draft pick at this point here. And also, if the indicator for people out there is like, oh, they'll bench their starters, You might be looking at Tyrod Taylor, the better quarterback right now than Aaron Rodgers, who might play 3 quarters if Aaron Rodgers is out to aim to get 1 touchdown pass, let's just say, to Devontae Adams. So when you're looking on that back end of it, are the Jets actually improving once Aaron Rodgers leaves in a cold environment with a quarterback that can actually avoid a pass rush that's coming out of him today? So I'm with you guys. I think the Jets, pound for pound, man for man, are the better team. But what is that organization going to do to sabotage this football game to make sure they don't win, to get a better draft pick for a new coach and a new GM?
I'm telling you, everything you said is fantastic. This is insane that the Dolphins are going for a playoff spot and the Jets are significantly more interesting going into this game.
They are.
You hit all the right topics, Donnie. Nobody cares. Nobody wants them to win. Nobody. They don't want to win, I don't think.
Correct.
Like, Tyreek Hill is probably going to be checking that Chiefs-Broncos thing out there, and if all of a sudden KC's pulling off an upset,
does an AB? He does the AB in the same stadium?
I'm out of here. It is so incredible to me that is where the Dolphins are.
Yeah.
So let me not waste any other time in it. I was talking with someone yesterday who said to me they think Aaron Rodgers is playing his last career football game today. And it might sound crazy, but sometimes things are out of your hands. Bill Belichick is not at North Carolina by his own doing. It is possible that Aaron Rodgers is playing his last career NFL game today, Joe. It's very on the board.
It is. And think about, Joe Flacco, right, that had a 1-year hiatus, right? Nobody wanted Joe Flacco, and he was a little bit younger and didn't have the significant injury that Aaron Rodgers has. But he's a cancer to the locker room. Who wants Aaron Rodgers? Even if you're a team like, I'll just throw it out, Indianapolis or Jacksonville,
Sure.
And I know they're solidified with their quarterback positions, but at the end of the day, a beaten-down franchise, Tennessee, you want to have Aaron Rodgers in your locker room that can't get along with anybody, that doesn't elevate anybody around him? He just wants it his way or no way? And then the team is just mired in mediocrity?
Yeah. There's no way that this is Aaron Rodgers' last game in the NFL. He needs that spotlight way more than we believe. Somebody is going to give him an opportunity at a cheap number. He's going to be able to convince that organization, I'm the missing piece, and let's move forward.
Well, hold on. Remember the old Cam Newton thing? Would Rodgers take a chance to compete? Would Rodgers go if it's not guaranteed starting work?
Yes, he would.
That becomes very, very interesting. We get to the NFC South next on SportsGrid.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes the ankle, Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3 here. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.